I wanted to start tonight by telling you some stories. And I recently woke up in the middle of the night from a dream, a bad dream, and my heart was beating really fast. My solar plexus was tied up in knots. And I felt like in that dream I was about to lose someone that I really loved. But instinctively, I began to place my hands on my body, and I began to breathe a little deeper. And soon my breath began to settle, my heart began to settle. And I realized in that moment the power that self-love and being really present with myself have had in my life. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about that power, and also to remind you that in your heart you have this love inside of yourself that you can use for yourself anytime that you need it. I believe we all have the power to love ourselves through any challenges that we face in our lives. And when we tap into that power, that is when we can really live beyond our fears. And that is when we can take bigger leaps and we can really fully share our gifts in the world. Now, 6 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was living in New York City, and I was at the end of college applying to work at jobs where I'd be sitting in front of the computer 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And I was feeling pretty exhausted, stressed out, and I began developing a pain in my body. And it began as this pain behind my eye, behind my eyebrow, and it went down one whole side of my body, all the way into my hip, my leg, down to my foot. And I began going to doctors. What is this pain? What is this that I'm suffering from? And they said, well, let's do these tests. We did MRIs, I did blood work, all of that, and the tests came back normal. And they were like, well, we're not sure what to tell you. Maybe let's try some prescriptions. Let's try anti-anxiety pills. Let's try muscle relaxants. Let's try even antidepressants. Did you know that over 40 million people in the US right now are taking antidepressants? And just from 1999 to 2012, the number of people taking them has nearly doubled. And that really showed me that we are so quick to numb out our symptoms rather than really looking at the root of the problem. So I tried taking those pills for a little while, felt pretty weird on them, and I was like, this isn't for me. I need to find something else. And luckily around that time, my friend took me my first yoga class. And I was in yoga class, I was in pigeon pose that we're going to be doing tonight. So you'll get to feel what I was feeling that night of just like going into that sensation in my hip and really feeling what was there. And this time, instead of trying to distract myself and take myself away from it, I breathed. And I went deeper. And I was really present with myself. And as I did that, I found that that pain began to open up. And it began to release. And I realized that this pain that I was having in my body was actually a calling to more deeply be present with myself, to more deeply love myself. And that actually, I thought that my greatest suffering was the world doing things to me, but actually my greatest suffering was just not being fully present with myself. It was a lack of that self-love. And I think that's for all of us. We can be in that presence. We can be in the difficulty, the challenge with what comes up in our body and also in our lives. So as I began to feel into that pain deeper, that was when I was granted access to my intuition, my body's wisdom. And that was when I began to see new visions for my life. I imagined moving across the country. I imagined going to India, started having these ideas. And at first it felt like scary. I don't know what to do with this, but I continued in my practices of self-love. I continued in my practices of listening. And soon enough, I worked up the courage to take that first leap. And I moved across the country to San Francisco without knowing anyone here. And it's been 6 years, and I'm still here. I just found a place to live on Craigslist at that time, and little by little, 10 days after being in San Francisco, I was sitting in Dolores Park, and a man just walked up to me and said, "I don't know why I feel the need to tell you this, but I'm going to meet a saint this weekend, and I think you're supposed to go." And that saint happened to be Amma, the hugging guru. And I said, yes, I went. I thought these things don't normally happen to me, but it was really when I started tuning into my intuition and facing my fears that these synchronicities started happening in my life. This deep woven interconnectedness of everything coming together in just the right time, just the right place. And that's why I wrote this book, Synchronicity. And because of all of you and my community, it is now going to be published. We've raised over $10,000. I thank all of you so much. And I have one more story for you. When I was in India, as I started deepening my practices of self-love and really finding that love within myself, it began to be reflected in the outside. And I met a man at that time. His name was Shankara, and we fell in love. And we traveled through India together, dated about 4 or 5 months. And from the very beginning, he told me, he was a devotee of Osho. He lived in the Osho commune in Pune for 7 years. And Osho's teachings are very much about freedom and love. And he said, my heart is with you, but if I were to find a connection with someone else, I will not be possessed. I will explore that. And I thought, oh my God, my heart is opening. This is so dangerous. But at the same time, I didn't want to give up that opportunity for love. And so I said, okay, I trust. And from there, we were living in Dharamsala in North India. It's at the base of the Himalayas. It's where the Dalai Lama lives. And we lived in the same guest house. We had our own room. So around that time, I also decided to go to a Vipassana meditation retreat, 10 days of 10 hours a day, silent meditation. And it was there that I really began to just tune into my sensations and my breath, to be present with myself, become a witness to everything that was there, everything that was coming up, to not judge it or attach a story to it, but rather just feel the pure sensations. And that also really helped me with that physical pain that was coming up. It was first the yoga practice helped me to go deeper into it, to be with it, and then also just the practice of Vipassana, becoming a witness, knowing that everything is impermanent, everything arises and passes away. Now there was one morning after my retreat where every morning, Shankar and I would have this routine. I would go knock on his door, and we would go up to the Vipassana meditation center. We'd sit for our hour meditation, and then we would start our days. And there was one morning when I went to go knock on his door, and as I'm about to knock, I looked down, and there were another woman's shoes outside of his door. And again, I felt my heart beating, breaking, felt that my solar plexus tied up in knots. My worst fear was coming true. This person I cared about so deeply was in this room with someone else, and it was so early in the morning, I just knew she had been there all night. And part of me was fuming and wanted to slam down that door and say, "What are you doing?" But my wiser, higher self said, "No, this is time to go to your practice." And I turned around and I ran up to that meditation center. I threw off my shoes. I sat down in my seat, and tears just started pouring down my face. And I sat with the sensations that came up there. And I just allowed everything, to feel everything, the anger, the frustration, the grief, the pain. I began to notice my breath. I would notice from the top of my head down to the tips of my toes, from the tips of my toes back to the top of my head for a whole hour. And by the end of that hour, the sensations had mostly subsided. And I began to practice metta meditation, loving kindness. And in metta, we first send love into ourselves. We fill ourselves up with that love. And then we send it out to others. And first I sent it out to people I had met in my travels, friends, teachers I had had. And then I began to send it out to people maybe I didn't even know very well. I was just imagining sending out that feeling of love. And I found myself even being able to send love to Shankara and this woman who I didn't know who was in his room. I look back on this as a profound gift, because that moment made me realize that I have this love inside of myself that I can give to myself any time that I need it. And no one can take that away from me. And it was in that moment that I released myself from being a victim, and I choose to forgive. I choose to accept this person for who he was. It was for the first time I think I really, really understood what love without conditions was. Unconditional love. And that didn't mean that I could still have my boundaries and maybe not decide to be in that situation, but it did mean that I could forgive and I could accept this person for who he was. So if you only remember one thing tonight, you leave tonight, and you only remember one thing, I hope that you remember that you have this love inside of yourself and that you can use it anytime you need it. You can work through any challenges or difficulties that come your way. And sometimes we just need to be reminded of that love that is within ourselves. And we're going to be doing that tonight in our practice. And I leave you with an invitation to think of any challenges or difficulties that you're facing in your life and to see them instead as a sacred opportunity to more deeply love yourself. So with that, we're going to begin our practice.